On July 9, 1896, inside a packed convention hall in Chicago, a 36-year-old congressman from Nebraska finished a speech with a single sentence that would define American politics for a generation. "You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." The response was immediate. People screamed, hats flew into the air, and delegates carried the speaker out of the hall on their shoulders. It remains the most electrifying moment in the history of American political conventions. It turned an obscure second-term representative named William Jennings Bryan into the youngest presidential nominee a major party had ever chosen. But the fury behind that speech didn't start in that convention hall. It was the culmination of 23 years of accumulated rage over a dry technical bill passed back in 1873, a bill that millions of Americans had come to believe was a deliberate betrayal. At the time, the Coinage Act of 1873 felt like the least controversial piece of legislation imaginable. It was a broad, bureaucratic overhaul of the U.S. Mint that few people in Congress even bothered to debate. But by the 1890s, critics were calling it the crime of 1873. They alleged that Eastern banking interests and European creditors had secretly engineered the bill to quietly remove the silver dollar from circulation, anticipating a shift in the economy years before it happened. The accusation was specific. By tightening the money supply, bankers ensured that every dollar they were owed became more valuable in real terms. It was a policy that protected the lender, while leaving the borrower to struggle under the weight of an increasingly expensive currency. However, for this to be a coordinated betrayal, the people in that 1873 committee room would have needed to predict a massive geological event that hadn't even happened yet. To see why the bill seemed so boring in 1873, we have to look at bimetallism. For most of the 19th century, the U.S. fixed silver to gold at 16-1, but under Gresham's law, undervalued metals vanish. Because raw silver's price rose above the official rate, nobody brought it to the mint. By the 1870s, the silver dollar was functionally dormant. When Congress dropped the silver dollar from the mint's production list in 1873, they were not attacking a circulating currency. They were performing a technical cleanup of a coin that had already essentially stopped existing. The bill sat on the books, ignored, for an entire year. Then the ground in Nevada cracked open. Massive new silver deposits were discovered across the American West, flooding the market with ore on an industrial scale. As the supply surged, the market price of silver plummeted. For the first time in decades, silver was becoming genuinely cheap relative to gold. Under the old rules, silver miners could have brought this cheap metal to the mint and struck it into dollars at that favorable 16-1 ratio. But they discovered that the Coinage Act of 1873 had already quietly closed that door, just months before the boom really began. It was a collision of timing. A dull administrative update accidentally cut off a massive boom before anyone realized it was coming. This happened just as the broader economy slid into a financial panic and a long era of deflation. As the money supply contracted, the value of every circulating dollar began to rise. For farmers, the math was truly brutal. This chart shows a typical $1,000 loan. While that debt stayed fixed, the price of wheat fell year after year. A farmer borrowing at $1 a bushel suddenly needed twice as many bushels and twice as much labor to pay the exact same debt. As farms were foreclosed by the thousands, the debate over currencies stopped being an abstract economic argument and became a matter of survival. These families looked back at the 1873 bill and saw a calculated crime rather than a bureaucratic coincidence. This agricultural pain forged the Populist movement. They elevated free silver into a crusade, demanding the unlimited coinage of silver to deliberately expand the money supply and ease the weight of debt for the common man. But the movement hit a wall in the 1896 election. Bryan lost to William McKinley, who was backed by industrial interests that successfully framed free silver as a threat to the country's financial stability. In 1900, Congress passed the Gold Standard Act, formally anchoring the U.S. to gold alone and ending the silver debate that had consumed the nation for 30 years. Then a strange irony occurred. Right as the Populists lost their crusade, massive new gold discoveries were made in the Klondike and in South Africa, flooding the world with a wave of newly mined gold. This flood of new gold naturally expanded the global money supply. Prices stopped falling, and the deflation that had crushed American farmers eased without a single ounce of silver ever being added back to the system. Economic historians today find little evidence of a coordinated banking conspiracy in 1873. What actually happened was a dull administrative bill colliding with a mining boom and an era of deflation. The crime was a myth, but the suffering it explained was real. And while the metals have changed, the fundamental argument, who controls the money supply and who benefits when it moves, remains at the center of the economy today.